Hi guys, welcome to Safe Diving. So in that video, I basically told you the pros and cons of diving a backplate and harness setup. In this video, I told you about how to buy a backplate and harness setup, and in this video I'm going to tell you how to build your backplate and harness setup, because you can buy all the different sort of ingredients and parts separate and kind of mash it together. There's nothing wrong with that as long as everything lines up, but you can also get kits. A lot of the kits, they do come with sort of instructions on how to thread it, but they're the usual kind of IKEA instructions and they're not always that straightforward. So in this video, yeah, I'm going to show you how to thread a single piece harness. It's not that difficult. It's just in the after bits, just sort of making sure everything's in the right position. You're not lopsided. Nothing's kind of twisted over. So first of all, let's take a look at sort of what you need, the different components. Obviously, you need a backplate. You can't thread it without a backplate, and they're all fairly similar. Unless you go for something exotic like an X Deep, you're going to have these slots. These ones here are going to be for your shoulder straps. These ones here, these are going to be when it turns into your waistband, these two parallel slots. And that's all we're really interested in today, except the crotch strap, the sort of horizontal one down at the bottom. That's going to be for your crotch strap, but that's all you're kind of interested for your harness. As far as the harness, the first thing you're going to need is about 12 feet of 2-inch webbing, something like 12 feet. You're going to be cutting off excess material, but yeah, about 12 foot should do most people. If you're buying it as a kit, they'll often have a grommet somewhere there. Smack dab in the middle, you'll have a little grommet, and that's going to line up with one of these holes on your back plate. If you don't have these, it's fine, it's not an issue. You can make it yourself. All you have to do is basically melt it away and sort of keep it nice and neat. It's almost a better way of doing it, because then you can have it exactly line up with your back plate, because some of them, you can see how this one isn't perfectly central. It's ever so slightly high. Sometimes it's really high, sometimes it's low, depending on which way it's turned. But yeah, if you don't have one, it's almost better, because you can just make your own exactly where you need it to be. You'll also need a crotch strap. So the crotch strap will be made out of a softer 2-inch webbing, because, you know, and this will have a loop on one side. This is the front, so this is going to go over your waistband in the front, and that usually has a fixed D-ring sort of in there, and that's usually stitched in position. You can make this yourself, but it is a bit of a pain. But yeah, if you can get one sort of pre-made, perfect. But this is usually a softer material. Then we get onto our D-rings. So you're going to need 2 pre-bent 2-inch D-rings. These can be steel, aluminium, titanium, whatever you want. And to go with those, you're going to need 2 of these tri-gliders. And then we have 2 flat D-rings. So these don't have any bend in them. Again, they're 2 inches wide. We're going to need a little bungee loop. This is nothing fancy. This is just like 3mm bungee. This is going to be for my BCD inflator hose, just to stop that from flapping around, and that's just tied in a knot basically to stop that from undoing. 2 of these kind of bungee loops, so these are stopping your accessories from flapping around over your shoulders. 2 sections of what's this called, inner tube. Just make sure you get the right size, something that's about 2 inches when it's a little bit stretched. This is just tidying up any loose ends of that 2-inch webbing. A quick release buckle for your waistband, that's essential. Actually, how many tri-gliders? You'll need about 5 tri-gliders? Yeah, 5 tri-gliders in full. 4 for D-rings, 1 for your crotch strap. No, sorry, 3 for D-rings. 1 for your crotch strap D-ring, and then 1 for your sort of harness. You might need an extra one, so that would make 6 in total. I've only got 5 because I'm using a gear Harper loop to make mine a little bit more adjustable. If you don't have one of these, then you'll need an extra 6th tri-glider. Any accessories, padding that you might want or need, and that's about it. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing, we're going to start at the top of the back plate, and I'm just going to flip it over. And we're interested in these sort of 45-degree angle slots. You want the middle of your webbing harness, and you basically want to find that that grommet and kind of line it up with that hole in the back plate. And what I like to do is I get a little nut and a bolt, and I basically lock them off just so it doesn't move around and give me any grief later on. To make sure that's sort of nice and central. And then you're basically just going to thread this strap through that 45-degree slot and pull it tight. One of the most important things about this sort of whole process is to kind of go all the way before progressing. Because a lot of the time, especially the first time you do it, you'll thread something and it will be twisted. So you'll get an extra twist and then you have to undo everything. So it's best to make sure that it's nice and sort of neat the first time. Exactly the same on the other side, just mirrored, and thread that through. And then route them up towards the top of the back plate, and then we're going to thread them through these horizontal slots, and these are going to become your shoulder straps. So thread it up and through. And same on the other side. Give it a little tug just to make sure that it's nice and neat and there's no kind of slack anywhere. Make sure there's nothing twisted over on the underside, because that's the last thing you want. You don't want any sort of extra slack just to go and give you an extra ½ inch when you're actually getting kitted up. So yeah, just make sure it's nice and neat. So then what we're going to do is I'm going to thread on some padding just for my shoulders and to protect my dry suit from any sort of rubbing. So this is where stiffer sort of webbing material makes life a bit easier, because it's as much as it's harder to sort of bend and flex, you can sort of push it through stuff like this. Same on the other side. This whole thing kind of tests your spatial awareness on sort of how a flat object is sort of twisting and turning, and which object is the right way up at any given time. But eventually you'll thread this through. This is almost the hardest part because it's a soft material. Okay, so shoulder padding's in position. I normally lift it about there off the harness, just so it's not touching. So the main benefit is for my sort of suit and shoulders. Flip the back plate over and put these out sort of nice and straight. And now we're going to move on to our D-rings. So I'm going to start off over my left hand shoulder because this is where my inflator is going to be. My one, you can see it's got these really handy kind of ridges in. That's only because this is my harness, so I've just undone it and now I'm putting it back on. Yours won't have these little sort of bumps and ridges. Don't worry about that. Just put them kind of wherever, and then afterwards I'm going to show you how to sort of move them and put them in the right position so you can clip off without thinking. So we're going to need a tri-glider, a pre-bent D-ring, and our bungee loop. So first of all, with the tri-glider, so you basically go up. You can see how this is ever so slightly bent. Most of them are straight, so it doesn't really matter, but for the bent ones, it's best to have the bent surface up, and that just lifts your D-ring a little bit away from your harness. And you're going to go up through the first slot, thread it down just to make sure you put it on the right way. And then we're going to have our D-ring. Actually, no, we're going to put our bungee on first, and then closely followed by our D-ring. And you need to put it on this way up so that when it's flat against your harness, it's pointing downwards, and the kind of bent is lifting away from your harness, just so that you can clip off onto it a bit easier. So then they kind of marry together, and then your harness strap is going to go back through that tri-glider, through the second slot. And that just sits there, and that's in position. So my bungee loop, this is keeping my my low pressure inflator hose from just rolling around and just disappearing, and then my D-ring just sits there ready to sort of clip anything off onto it. And then the rest of the strap just continues. That eventually will become my waistband. Exactly the same on the right hand side. I get a pre-bent D-ring and a tri-glider. Tri-glider goes on first. You start off going up underneath the glider, put that in position, then the pre-bent D-ring facing downwards, and then thread the strap back down through that tri-glider. Pull it all the way through. If you have shoulder straps, it almost makes your life a little bit easier. You're just going to put those about an inch sort of below where that stops. They come in different lengths, but usually they're a good sort of indicator of where your D-rings are going to go. But really, it's kind of, if you close your eyes and go to touch your shoulder, you kind of want it there. If it's too high, then it's just going to get in the way. If it's too low, then you're going to struggle to find it. So just kind of there, kind of almost in line with your, almost a little bit lower than your clavicle. But yeah, just where you naturally go to sort of clip something off onto it. Underneath that, I put our little section of bungee. So this is for accessories. So your backup torch or anything that's going to dangle, that's going to sit just there underneath the D-ring. And basically, if I grab something on a bolt snap. So say I have a backup torch, this is a knife, but something on a bolt snap, and I'm clipping it off onto that D-ring. If I'm just diving horizontally, this is just going to dangle around and just sort of be annoying. So with this, you tuck it underneath, and that basically holds it against the harness, so it doesn't dangle or kind of move around. It stays exactly sort of nice and streamlined against my my body. So that's what those sort of sections of sort of webbing are for. You can use these guys, the bit of inner tube, but I just find they're a bit of a pain, especially when you're wearing sort of thicker gloves to get hold of. These guys are quite nice because they've got this kind of tab that you can just kind of pinch and grab hold of, and yeah, they're just a bit nicer. Okay, so we've done the shoulder straps. Now we're going to turn onto the waistband. Okay, so to turn your shoulder strap into your waistband, if you take the inside edge and then put that to the bottom of the slot, so it goes in that way. that creates a nice kind of ergonomic shape, so it kind of fits against your body and it doesn't dig in. If you do it the other way around, it's a little bit twisted and it can get uncomfortable. I'm now going to flip it over. So before I thread it back through this parallel slot, we're going to use one of these tri-gliders to act as a locking mechanism. So we're just going through the tri-glider, no D-ring or anything because you don't need it, and that's just going up in there, and then the strap just goes straight back through the back plate. Now you can go without this kind of lock, but if you kind of tug on that strap, it will ever so slightly move, and over time it's just going to be uncomfortable, so it's best just to kind of put that locking mechanism in. On the other side, if I flip it back over, I'm going to use something different. So on the other side, I'm going to use this A-gear Harper loop. So this is a way of making my left-hand shoulder strap kind of quick adjust without kind of cutting it or sort of breaking that that loop. It's a very clever little mechanism, and it's just a loop that sits through your back plate, and same as before, the inside edge goes to the bottom, and it just threads through. Okay, so on my left hand side, now I'm going to fit a D-ring, and this is for my SPG, and that's going to sit with one of these flat D-rings, and pretty much the same as the shoulder ones. You're going to thread it up through there, thread on the D-ring, doesn't matter which way up because it's straight, and then thread it straight back through. And that acts as a bit of a locking mechanism, so I can't pull my shoulder strap too much, but that kind of sits straight down my sort of torso, straight in the middle, and that's naturally where I'm going to clip something off onto it. Then I'm going to put one of these little bungee loops, and that's for the excess of this material, because I'm going to put my my quick release buckle on this side. So, quick release buckle. So the best way to do this can be a little bit fiddly, but you can see we've got these 3 slots. So the wide slot we're going to go through first, and then down through the third slot, back through the second, and then again through that sort of first slot. So we're coming up. We're then going down through the end slot. Hopefully you can see that. And then leave yourself a bit of wiggle room. Just going to move that down a bit, because we're going to work on the inside of this loop here. Put it back through that middle slot, and then loop it again. Give it a twist. Through that sort of thick first slot. It's quite fiddly, but because it's doubling back on itself, it's really, really strong. There you go. So once that's through, just kind of pull it nice and tight. Pull that side, and then just use this little loop just to tidy up any excess material. And make sure it's nice and straight. Okay, and you're pretty much there. So now all we need to do is put on the crotch strap, and then we can start adjusting for size, moving things around, and cutting off any excess material. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our crotch strap. So the first thing is if it's sort of in this position, as it were, have it facing downwards, so just like this, so that when that loops up in the front, it's the right way round. I've already threaded a bungee loop onto this for any excess material. And then we're going to put our tri-glider on. No, that way around. And then our straight D-ring, and then thread that back through itself. So that's just going to sit a little bit sort of below the plates, somewhere just sort of above your bum. And then we're going to go from the underside, the back of the back plate, and thread it up through this slot. Now, one thing you'll notice is that my back plate, it's only about an inch, maybe an inch and a half across, and I've got 2-inch webbing. That's unfortunate, makes my life a little bit harder. But most back plates nowadays, they always have 2-inch wide sort of webbing slots. So mine just gives me a bit of grief. And then I'm going to fold this back on itself, and it's basically going to sort of follow the line of that strap, and then sort of tuck in underneath. So it's going underneath, around the D-ring. I'll show you it that way around, and then back on itself. Again, it's a little bit fiddly at first, but once you've got it, it'll work fine. Make sure that's nice and snug, and then tidy that up. Okay, so now that's in position. Basically what we're going to do is check over everything, make sure everything's the right way around, make sure nothing is twisted, making sure that everything that we put on it is on it, and then yeah, we're going to put on all our gear, because it's best to do it when we're fully kitted up, size it up and move any D-rings, and I'm going to show you that now. Okay, so when you fitted your harness and it's all kind of in the sort of in position, you just need to double check that everything is kind of exactly where you want it to be. Everything's nice and equal, and it's exactly where you want it to be. So the first thing is to put it on just over a normal t-shirt, nothing too fancy. If you're diving in a dry suit with a really sort of thick and cumbersome undersuit, then we're gonna sort of touch on that later. You might need to adjust it a little bit, but if you're just diving in a sort of standard 5mm wetsuit, then yeah, just go for your sort of normal t-shirt. And with both shoulder straps, you basically want it so that you can put a closed fist underneath it, and that's about it. As long as it's not too tight, you can actually get your fist underneath there. That's fine. If it's too baggy, then you're just going to sort of move around, so kind of a closed fist is fine. On my left hand side, it doesn't matter so much because I've got that A-gear Harper loop. I can actually loosen and tighten this by taking some slack off of my waistband. But if you don't have that kind of sort of loop, then again, yeah, you just want a closed fist there. With your arms sort of straight outwards, and it's best done with your eyes closed, just kind of sort of go on the inside, and you should find both D-rings. If you don't, then actually a really good way of doing it is either get a piece of chalk and sort of put that on the harness, and then literally draw a line on the harness where you want those D-rings to be, because by the time that you've taken it off and you put it down in front of you and then you get to the actual D-ring, it can be quite hard to remember how far and which D-ring, and yeah. So if you've got a definitive chalk line saying, right, oh, I've got to move that ½ an inch down, it just makes your life a lot easier. The same with the waist D-ring. Now, I usually wear this over my dry suit, as you've seen, so this one's a little bit far forwards, but normally you want this one just straight down the center of your body. So in a dry suit, that would be just in the t-shirt is a little bit forwards, and the buckle of your waistband just to the right of center where your crotch strap is going to be. That's where I like to keep mine. You can obviously access the front D-ring. You can hopefully access the back D-ring just over your butt. And just to double check that everything is right, when it's in position, just reach behind you and see if you can touch the top of the backplate. You should be able to just about touch it with both hands, and if you can, that's perfect. So yeah, just spend some time. If you've got a buddy with you as well, that can always help because they can draw the chalk lines and just sort of make your life a bit easier. But yeah, hopefully it should fit you nice and comfortably. So yes, as I said earlier, if you get to this point and you are diving like a commercial diving, like 8mm thick sort of neoprene dry suit and a heavy undersuit underneath it, then yeah, unfortunately you're going to have to put that sucker on and then sort of put this on just to double check that everything is exactly where you want it to be. If everything, all the D-rings are where you want it to be, it's nice and comfortable, now is the point when you can start to cut off any excess strap. Now, my father always taught me measure twice, cut once, so I'm very reluctant to cut away excess. I've left a good sort of 6 inches of sort of excess webbing just so that I can adjust it. I don't know, maybe I get particularly hungry this Christmas time and next year I need a little extra slack on my waistband. So yeah, I normally give myself a decent amount of sort of extra leeway just so I've got some room to expand, shall we say. And then you basically cut off the excess. I use just trauma shears. I just find these are very effective. If you have one of those, I can't even think what they're called, they're like electric heat knives, and they can basically melt as they cut. That's perfect. If you don't, if you're like me, and you don't even know what they're called, then yeah, pair of sort of trauma shears and then sort of cigarette lighter, just kind of melt that edge just so it doesn't fray, and then eventually sort of work its way down. On the other side, I actually melt it like that, if you can see that, just so there's a bit of an angle and then just a flat tab. I just find it's a little bit easier to thread through the quick release buckle. I've seen some people do like lovely circles, but I didn't like my chances of doing a perfect sort of half circle. But yeah, I just find it a lot easier to sort of thread instead of just a solid square tab. Up to you. How I do it is, yeah, I just cut that corner off and then melt it down into sort of a point if you can. Use the sort of broad side of a knife just to sort of squidge it down so it becomes more of a V shape sort of profile. And yeah, touch wood, personally I find it much easier to sort of slot that through that quick release buckle. So yes, now is your chance to play about with your backplate and harness setup. You can add extra little bits like my A-gear harper loop. You can sort of move things around. If you want some extra D-rings, then go for it, extra attachment points. Any kind of integrated weight system, whatever you want, you can add those at a later date. But this is very much a sort of a basic kind of DIR style setup, except for that sort of A-gear harper loop. Yeah, let me know how I did in the comments below. Let me know what your sort of harness and backplate recommendations are. If you prefer stainless steel, if you prefer this kind of solo piece harness or something a bit more complicated, let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.